Are we ready?
Are we ready? Well, good evening. I'm Charlie McCormick, president here at Schreiner University, and I'm delighted to welcome you to our fall 2022 visiting artist presentation featuring Alfonso Hernandez. And Alfonso has had and will continue to have a full week of visiting classes, and he's already been to Tybee. I think he's off to Ingram tomorrow morning to work with third, fourth, and fifth graders. God bless him. He'll be exhausted after that. He's going to visit with the media while he's here, but tonight he's all ours. And I know there are a lot of people who are anxiously watching the election this evening, but I think this is a pretty good way to spend election night. So Alfonso's visit, of course, is funded through the Summerlin Visiting Artist Chair, which honors our former president, Dr. Tim Summerlin, and the memory of his nephews, Reuben and Daniel Summerlin. And please join me in recognizing Dr. Summerlin, the 5th president of Schreiner, who's with us in the audience tonight. So Alfonso and I are going to start this evening, before he does some Piñata work and I talk a little bit about art. We're going to start with a little conversation. So Alfonso, first of all, tell us the vitals. Name, age, birthplace, education, all of that sort of stuff.
All right. Hello, everybody. Just want to start off by saying it's a huge honor to be here. And this is my second time holding a microphone ever. So y'all bear with me on this. All right. So my name is Alfonso Hernandez, also known as the Piñata Man. I'm from Dallas, Texas, born and raised. And before I get into like the education and stuff like that, the name Piñata Man was just kind of something we threw out there, right? You know, you got the ice cream man, pizza man, so you know, why not the Piñata Man, right? So nothing super crazy. Just kind of fit well. So as far as education, I do have a degree in drafting and design, so it's where you know the foundation to like my art is. So it's just a little bit of drafting. I drafted irrigation systems for about 7 years and did some pretty big projects. Did the Dallas Cowboys Stadium back when they were getting that thing built. So small part, but a part, right? Got to see the blueprints of the building and stuff before it was actually built. So it was a pretty cool thing. So did drafting, you know, for about, I think it was about 6 or 7 years. And didn't feel like I was getting anywhere, you know, mainly because like when you're drafting, you have to continue your education. You have to, you know, become an engineer, an architect, just to be the boss, right? So I would see the IT guy come in. IT guy would come in, and he would stay for about like 20 minutes, and then everybody would complain about how he did, you know, little work and got paid a lot of money. So, you know, definitely caught my attention, and I was like, all right, cool. You know, kind of turned around, looked, and I was like, all right, I think I'm gonna do that next. So. You know, went back to school and, you know, learned how to work on computers and, you know, learned about customer service and dealing with people and stuff like that when they're, you know, a lot of times when your computer's broken, you know, you're already having a bad day, right? So, you know, learning, you know, just learning how to help people. And I found, you know, I enjoyed it. So, loved IT work. Did that for about 6 years as well. Started at the bottom, you know, help desk guy, and moved up to a project manager. So, you know, the project manager position was probably the most fun, you know, like professional career that I had. Got to travel, been to 25 states and about 40 cities. So maybe, actually it's 41 since I'm here now, right? So, yeah, no, it's, you know, it's been a crazy journey as far as like not art, like not doing anything with art. But yeah, that's kind of my background there. So
Great, thank you. You said you studied some design. Any graphic design majors in the house tonight? Yeah. All right. On their way. Right?
yeah, well, see, I thought I was getting into graphic design. I thought that's what it was, and it was actually like drafting. It was more on like blueprints and stuff like that. I thought I was going to be able to draw on a computer, like 3D type stuff. That's what I thought I was getting into. So I was kind of surprised, like when I was getting to the end, and I was like, hey, when are we doing the 3D classes? Like, they were like, no, this is not bad. And I'm like, what?
He was asking, what am I doing at the giraffe? It's Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Yeah, it was all good though. I enjoyed it. So I got to our capstone project. They wanted us to design our like dream house, right? And I'm a huge He-Man fan, so my dream house is not a house; it's actually a castle. So you know, while everybody else, you know, they had their traditional houses with a lot of rooms and you know this and that, I built a castle, and I had secret doors and you know just the whole, you know, everything, you know, the inside of the castle is all glass and like you can see all over the place. So super cool. I'll have to bring those out one day.
Next visit, right? We want to see the castle. So, Alfonso, tell us about your earliest memory with a piñata. Do you remember what that was?
Yeah, so the earliest memory, it probably, I didn't have any, I don't have any memories of like myself with the piñata. Like my first memory is with my daughter. With her birthday, we wanted to get her a piñata. She was having a Dora birthday party. So, Dora, I don't know if you guys know who Dora is, but she has a look, right? She has her short hair and, you know, stuff like that. So my daughter dressed up as Dora. And we actually found a really good piñata. It took us a little bit to find it because it is hard to find good piñatas, but we found it and we still have it. So, yeah, that thing is, it's in our closet. We keep it away from light. It's super nice. I'm gonna put it up on the shelf one day. So, yeah, we still have it.
That's wonderful. So you were in drafting and doing a lot of drafting work, and even in IT. When did you first start saying to yourself, "Wait a second, I'm an artist"?
That's a good question. So I grew up around art. My father was an artist, and he was an airbrush artist, and he also worked on cars. He would like fully customize cars, restore cars, and stuff like that. So he took a lot of pride in his work and was very detailed. And so I was exposed to art at an early age, but never really felt like I was the artist, right? Like I didn't, like that was my dad, and I was me. I was just a kid. I was worried about my Ninja Turtles and my He-Man. Like where are they? And you know, so my dad was an artist, and you know, the next time I picked up art, it was for my daughter. You know, I wanted her to do something, so we went and bought her like an art set. So it was like an apron and some paint and like, you know, those poster boards. And me and my daughter, we actually started painting together. And she didn't know what she was doing, you know, but she was having fun and we were doing it together. So that was like the first time that I actually picked up a brush. And shortly after, we purchased a house. And we were looking at like canvases to furnish the walls and stuff. And the paintings were expensive, and I like big stuff, right? Because I'm from Texas, and that's how we roll. So, you know, I was looking at big canvases, and it cost a lot of money. So I was like, all right, well, you know, I went and bought some wood and bought some like a canvas roll, and made the canvases and bought some oil paint because that's what I heard professionals use. So, you know, some oil paint, and you know, pretty much. Created the canvas and painted the paintings for every wall, and then just put everything up and like didn't even like bat an eye at art anymore, and went back to work because you know like being an artist wasn't really a thing back then. It was a thing, but it was like difficult, and you hear a lot of like horror stories about being an artist. So you know it was more focused on the money and like you know just supporting the household, right? So yeah, so that was art has always seemed easy for me, right? So it always seemed easy. So like I created the canvas and painted them, and it was easy, and they looked, you know, I thought they looked amazing because I worked on them until they were amazing. So I probably took about a week for each one, and it wasn't a week, like a full week. It was more like I would work on it one day, spend an hour on it, and then walk away and you know kind of like just glance back at it and like, all right, I'm gonna do this, and then the next day I'll put like another hour. So they're probably about like 7 to 10 hour pieces, but like took a whole week to make because like I needed the paint to dry, and then also just wanted to like step back and really think about like what I was doing. So so that's like, you know, there's little art has always seemed easy. It was always around. But I still didn't think that I could be an artist, right? So a little bit after that, social media started to kick up, and I started noticing how how easy it was for you know, to like get your work out, right? Like you know, just exposure. You can, you know, just create a page and put your art on there, and people will like it, you know. So so it wasn't until I left my job, right, and I was looking for something new, and you know, I wasn't looking for anything. I had, you know, when I left my job, it was one of those deals where I was happy that I was able to learn so much. So it was a positive feeling leaving it. It wasn't like most people, like I wasn't upset, I wasn't sad or anything. I just felt like I had done enough. I was like, all right, you know, I accomplished a lot. And everybody that left that company usually ended up with like better jobs because of the experience that they got there. So I was good. I was like, all right, you know, what's next? And I'm looking, I'm asking, and I'm, you know, just, I like to tell people, like, if a fork would have fell off my lap, I probably would have been making forks right now. But, yeah, so somebody wanted a piñata, and they told me they were gonna get it from Mexico and pay $100. I was like, $100? I was like, you know, let me give it a shot, let me try it out. And, you know, halfway through the process, I knew it, I felt it. I was like, man, the same thing, this is easy. So I stopped on that one, and I started to create 4 other ones. So I don't really have a first piñata, I have a first set. And why I did the first set, I think some of the feelings were, I just wanted to prove that I could do it. Like, I can make piñatas. Because if I would have just made one, it would have been like, all right, that's cool, right? But I wanted to make a lot of them. I wanted to make sure that, like, when I started to promote myself, that, yeah, I can do that. I made like 5 different ones. Like, so I made Bowser, right? The guy from Super Mario. And I made Batman. So Batman is a piñata that's been around. Like, you see a lot of crazy looking Batmans, right? Like, it's just never one that really does any justice, right? And so Batman, I did Captain America, which was super hard. And let me see, I did Spider-Man. Oh yeah, the Ninja Turtle. I always forget him. And I'll tell you that I love Ninja Turtles all day, but I always forget that guy. So made those 5, and the first piñata of mine that were broke, that it wasn't actually broken. We took the Ninja Turtle out to a birthday party and we shot arrows at it. So I love, like, I like bow and arrows too. So yeah, so we shot arrows at it, and you know, it was a good time because, you know, piñatas, they're made for entertainment, right? You know, just like the bounce houses and all that stuff. You want to keep the kids busy for a good while. And yeah, it's just one of those things. You know, we did break another one there, but the first one was shot with some arrows. I got some video of that, and I'll release it one day.
So I do want folks to know that while Alfonso will head back to Texas, the mountain lion that he's working on over here, over his right shoulder, stays with us. Wow. So that will So if I wasn't mistaken, Alfonso, you told me you made somewhere on the order of 3,000 piñatas. Is that the right number?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
So of those 3,000, do you have one that is most famous?
Yeah, actually, that's the one right there. That's kind of weird. So it's a weird coincidence. Yeah, no. So that one right there went viral. It's probably the most famous, right? And it was definitely up there as far as like stress goes and pressure, mainly because of you know, who she is and her family's beliefs. So there was a little pressure there. And I just like making a piece. I just hope that everybody, you know, received it well. Like, you know, everybody from, you know, the family, the fans, and kids. Like, I didn't want anybody to be like scared of it or disappointed. So it definitely, there was definitely a little bit of pressure there, and it was received well by a lot of people. So it's super cool.
Now, was that at the state fair? Did you have that one at the state fair?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. And what piece are you perhaps most proud of? Or maybe it's the same piece, I don't know.
So proud of, I don't think I'm there yet, you know? I plan to have an art show next year, and you know, as far as like considering something a masterpiece, I mean, that's gonna be something that I work on.
Okay. Yeah. And what's been perhaps the most difficult piece that you've worked on?
So difficult. It's the same person, Selena, right?
Okay.
So I made a realistic version of her, and again with the fan base and all of that, they're real critical when they love, when they admire somebody so much. So the realistic Selena was probably the most difficult. It took the longest, and just like every day I wake up and I'll look at it and I'll be like, all right, this needs to change, and then I'll make that change, and the next day I'll wake up and see something else, and it's like the never-ending story, just on and on and on and on. It's just, it was definitely the most difficult.
Is it easy to make changes on a piñata, or do you have to start over again?
Sometimes it's easy. It depends on the change, because sometimes like if it's a drastic change, it's probably easier to start over. They're pretty easy. You can like build up or knock down. So it's just what it is. It takes time, right? So like if I make a change, I have to wait till the next day for it to dry.
So Alfonso, talk to us about what inspires you as an artist, whether that's a person or perhaps something else.
So as an artist, I don't know. That's a good question. I do try to I think when I started making piñatas, or just like the whole process of just thinking about making piñatas, I noticed something about the industry when it comes to piñatas. There was nobody, at the top. There was nobody that was considered like the best, or there was nobody that was like famous for piñatas. So I saw an opportunity, right? And the opportunity was like an empty chair. It's like, there's nobody sitting up there, so let me try to get there, And I knew, getting to the top of the industry was going to be difficult. So I think just every day, just trying to get better and better and better, and just trying to get to the top that's kind of what pushed me. So and then as I got further, people started to pick up their work. So it put a little bit more pressure on me to just work a little bit harder, just to separate myself from everybody else.
So you're not just an artist, of course, but you're a professional artist. So tell us about your business and how your business model works.
So my business is based off of customer service, right? That should be any business, taking care of your customers, being polite, and having a good product, making something that's amazing, making something that's memorable, and durability. As far as a durable piñata, I think that's real important. And I do take a lot of time into designing them so that they're durable. And I don't know if you guys ever been in line to break a piñata, but the worst feeling is being that kid that's next up, right? And it breaks. And it's man, I was right there. So definitely just making sure that they're super durable, so all of the kids can have a crack at it. And from what I hear, it usually takes 2 or 3 rounds. And for the parent, that's great. You just got, the kids are busy for, a couple of hours, so it just helps out with the party, so yeah.
So I told Alfonso I'm going to give you a list of questions I want to ask you, and I won't go off that list, but I'm actually going to go off the list now. Sorry, Alfonso. So we got several students in the room here tonight, and some of whom probably have an interest in being an artist one day. What advice would you give them?
So I was talking to a couple of individuals today, and I guess we were talking about burning out, right? Just burning out. What I try to do is just change the definition of burning out, right? Because you're obviously doing something that you love, right? So you're doing it, and you're doing it so much that you're gonna get burnt out, right? But in my eyes, burnt out doesn't mean to give up. It just means to take a break. You need a break, right? But don't give up. You just take some time off and regroup, rethink about it, and if you can get back to it, get back to it. So burning out is just a way of your body and your mind telling you that you had enough. Because obviously other people they tell me all the time, hey, you're gonna burn out, and I'm like okay, whatever I do, I'll just take a break and I'll be back. So yeah, just don't give up.
Students, no breaks for another 2 weeks. So Alfonso, what happens next with you? What happens next with your art? Tell us what to look forward to in the future.
That's a great question. I have a lot of plans, so it's going to take about 2 hours to talk about it. But so next after this, I'm taking a break. I'm not going to burn myself. I'm past burnt out. Like burnt out is like it's gone, right? So it's just on and on and on.
Wait till those elementary school kids tomorrow morning.
Like, well, if anything, we just need to have a mistake, right? You know, they can just have fun. So, like future plans, right? You know, I have a couple of big ones. So, one of them is my art show, right? So I've been making art for about 6 years or so, and haven't made any pieces for myself. I haven't made, you know, nothing that I really like, nothing that I wanted to make. My first 5 don't really count because there was something else. Like, I didn't really know what I was doing or how to do it, so I really don't count those 5. But I want to make, you know, I want to make the best that I can do with no limitations, no time limit, you know, no time limit, no budget, and just create my masterpieces and create an art exhibit, right? And I want to make art that's like hard to like almost impossible to see in person, right? Like things that you haven't seen in person. So right now I have about 10 pieces that I want to make, and yeah, just gonna push really hard. I'm planning on buying my own time, right? Because if I buy my own time, I can just say, hey, I'm booked up, and I can work on my pieces. And once I get the pieces done, you know, then it's about shopping it around, finding sponsors and stuff like that. And I do have a plan for that, and I'm a huge brainstormer, so like whenever I come up with an idea, first thing I do is, you know, get the markers, get the different color markers, because I'm a color guy too, so get the markers and get the, you know, huge piece of paper and just start brainstorming. And it's something I love doing. So art exhibit is, you know, one of the big things. Second thing is my Piñata kits. So this is something that I've been working on for about 3 or 4 years, and I know it's going to be industry changing. Like, you know, the fact that people will be able to build piñatas, you know, at home, not have to go to like 2 or 3 stores to get the materials, or like, you know, sometimes you can't find stuff. So, you know, definitely the Piñata kits are a big thing for me. And with that, I'll be launching YouTube videos. The YouTube videos, there'll be 2 different kinds. One would be like instructional videos for the art kids, but then the other one would be teaching people how to make stuff like this. So I feel comfortable enough to share that stuff with everybody. So I'm just ready, you know.
Well, we can't wait to see all the places you're going to go, Alfonso. We look forward to keeping up with you.
All right, awesome, thank you.
So we're going to do a little transition now, and Alfonso's going to go demonstrate how he works on piñatas. I'm going to transition to the podium, and we're also going to talk a little bit about art that's meant to be destroyed. So give us about 30 seconds and we'll get switched over to you.
Great, thank you guys.
All right, so, you know, it seems almost ridiculous in some ways to posit that art is either meant to be or should be destroyed. Casey and I were in New York City recently, and we spent most of our time visiting some of America's most beautiful temples. Temples given to a sort of worship of art and devoted to protecting, preserving, and displaying in perpetuity all art of all sorts. You'll know some of these: the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Guggenheim, featured here with its designer, Frank Lloyd Wright, MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art. But here's our favorite, probably, not in New York City, but here in Kerrville, MoA, the Museum of Western Art. And recently, you've no doubt seen that protesters have expressed their desire for disinvestments of fossil fuels by attacking works of art and gluing themselves to famous paintings. This slide shows a recent duo performing this stunt in The Hague, gluing themselves to Vermeer's masterpiece, Girl with a Pearl Earring, just before the Dutch police arrested them. And now maybe someone can make an argument about why this is an effective form of protest, but I don't get it, really. I mean, come on. Why destroy extraordinary art to make your point? We're trying to save it for the good of all of us, not destroy it, right? And it is, of course, an illusion that we can ever keep our art pure and protected forever. We just can't. Consider the restorer, whose job it is to keep our precious art intact. They're only able to do so not by keeping it pure, but by repainting, reglazing, and if we're to be completely honest, changing and altering the art we say we love so much. But most of this happens out of sight of the public so that we can maintain the illusion that this art is the same today, tomorrow, and forever. So an odd proposition though it may seem, we have plenty of examples of art that's meant to be destroyed. Banksy, the mysterious contemporary artist of which we know very little other than the work he or maybe she has produced, Banksy may have provided us the most famous example of artwork that's meant to be destroyed. In 2018, he sold a painting called Girl with Balloon for $1.4 million. And as soon as the auctioneer announced it was sold, a hidden shredder inside the frame destroyed most of the painting. That act, it was met with shock and maybe just a little dab of delight for those of us who wonder who in the world would pay $1.4 million for a piece of art, even if it was a very pretty balloon. The critics were quick to explain, of course, that this shredding was part of the art because it was meant to be destroyed. And it wasn't just the destruction of the art that we were witnessing. Lots of others concluded this was just another Banksy stunt, clever to be sure, but a stunt nonetheless. But here's the interesting thing. Sotheby's ended up selling this piece again recently. Girl with Balloon was now titled Love is in the Bin. And the $1.4 million original painting was resold for $25.4 million, setting a new sales record for Banksy. So was the painting destroyed, or was it not? Was it even a painting, or was it a performance? This is confusing stuff, so let's be precise with our terms here at the start. There's art that's meant to be destroyed, but there's also art that simply does not last because it's meant to be temporary. Take, for example, the palettes, which are our bodies. We care a great deal about the artistry of our bodies. Alfonso, this sort of body doesn't just happen. You got to really create it. Burritos, breakfast tacos. But we're all artists of our bodies. We shave our faces, or we don't. We cut our hair, or we don't. We bulk up our muscles and perhaps our lips. We color. We tattoo. We hope our work will last. Sometimes we do it all at once. Yikes, you're not going to be able to unsee that tomorrow. We want our artistry to last. We pray it will last, but it will not last. You can only keep that beautiful mullet for so long before it must become the ponytail of an old man. So our bodies serve as the canvas on which a very personal and very temporary art is created. But there are more conventional works of art that are also not meant to be destroyed per se, but are certainly not meant to last. Christos and his partner Jean-Claude may be the exemplars of this type of intentionally temporary art. This is an example of one of their pieces installed in Miami, Florida in 1983, and it's entitled Surrounded Islands. Almost all of their work involved large-scale and site-specific installations, often wrapping landmarks and landscape elements in fabrics. This is another example of their work. This from 1972, a 6-ton, 700,000 curtain billowing across Rightful Gap in Colorado. Works like this, they take years to prepare. They involve complex technical solutions, political negotiations, permitting, environmental approvals, hearings, and public persuasion. Their art would take years to prepare, even though it had a relatively short exhibition period. Colorado state officials gave permission for this curtain to hang for only 1 month. Now, as you might imagine, with art produced on this scale, their installations were almost always controversial. But the artists maintained that their projects contained no deeper meaning than their immediate aesthetic impact, the purpose being simply for joy, beauty, and new ways of seeing the familiar. To his critics, Christo replied, and I quote here, "I'm an artist, and I have to have courage. Do you know that I don't have any artwork that exists? They all go away when they're finished. I think it takes much greater courage to create things to be gone than to create things that will remain." Colorado officials gave permission for this curtain to hang in Rifle Gap for 1 month. The canyon winds actually tore it to shreds within 24 hours of it being hoisted up. Music and dance are art forms that I would argue also belong in this category of temporary art. The sound and the motion, they really don't exist outside of a specific performance. And the specific performance can't be duplicated, though it can be interpreted over and over again. Each performance then is necessarily temporary. And temporary art need not always exist on a large scale. It can exist on much smaller, more personal scales, flower arranging, for example, or on the decorated windows of a high school student's car, or as we see around the hill country all the time, on the decorated windows of campers' cars when camp drop-off or pickup is occurring. Sooner or later, though, all of that will be washed off. Halloween is barely over, and some of us now have rotting, sinking, smelly pumpkin goop where our beautiful jack-o'-lanterns used to be. And Casey, somebody's going to have to get up the nerve to pick that up off the porch. Yeah, I hope it's you. And of course, though we invest hours in creating our snowmen, the hill country sun ensures they have the briefest of lives. Sandcastles are temporary art too, though as a kid, and if I'm to be perfectly honest, as an adult, I always convinced myself that I'd dug a deep enough moat so that the castle could survive any tide the ocean cared to throw its way. Alas, wrong again. And this community experiences temporary art each year during our Chalk Fest event. One of my favorite examples of temporary art is a house of cards. And not just any old house of cards, but a house of cards made by Brian Berg, seen here. That guy's not using glue. Okay, I don't know if that's art that he's creating or if that's sorcery, but I'm just absolutely intrigued by this, especially knowing the collapse is inevitable. And he's made perfect peace with this. He's noted that many people love the collapse more than the improbable completion of the structure itself. I love it too. So what does this fascination with the collapse say about us? Why are we so enraptured by the house's fall? In rock stacks and in smoke rings and in food decorating of all sorts, we must continually make peace with the notion that some of our artistry just must be temporary. So let us nuance our genres of art even more. There's temporary art, as we've just seen, but there's also art that is itself destructive. I grew up in the 80s listening to hair bands and watching them smash guitars. I never got why they did that, except that even my high school self recognized that while the smash brought the music to an end, the destruction was its own artistic moment. You probably heard recently that Jerry Lee Lewis passed away. And incredibly, he's widely thought to be the first rock musician to officially destroy an instrument during a live performance. Although people usually think of Jimi Hendrix when it comes to burning stuff on stage, in the 1950s, it was Jerry Lee Lewis who reportedly set fire to numerous pianos, scaring audiences all around the U.S. Why did he do it? Well, hard to say, and the reasons for it are almost certainly multifaceted. But the destruction became another art performance in and of itself, and one that, for some, was the most eagerly anticipated part of the entire show. I think graffiti works in a similar fashion. It's an art form, sometimes a stunningly good art form, lots of times pretty mediocre, but its artistry stems from the way in which it is meant to be destructive, and therefore transformative of what it's laid on top of. Walls, trains, buses, overpasses. Graffiti almost never remains in a preserved state. It's always destroying and being destroyed by having more graffiti, as seen here, placed right on top of it. Graffiti becomes artistry and not just squiggles and simple pictures only when it destroys. I think even Legos become art when they destroy. Now, what in the world did he just say? Those sweet Legos have a destructive side to them? Now look, many of us have had the experience of receiving a brand new Lego set. We eagerly open the box, we pull out the directions, and we mindlessly snap pieces together until they form the image on the box. But that's not really artistry. That's something more like submission to our technical writer overlord who works at the Legos headquarters. But then we disassemble said Lego project and build something that was not intended when the Lego engineers designed this set. And that's when we get to go artistically crazy. Case in point. Here, the intended structure was a tranquil and festive holiday scene with gingerbread house, gingerbread man. We dutifully built it, just as the instructions demanded. But then our artistry kicked in, and we destroyed what was intended to be and rebuilt it. Now it became something entirely different, the site of a horrible attack by an oversized alligator. Now that's artistry. At least that's what I told Casey. There's power and delight in this destruction of what's supposed to be into something entirely new and unexpected, maybe even into art. And one more example, dominoes. The setup is destroyed when the first domino is knocked over, but in its destruction, it becomes something different, equally beautiful, something new. At least in this genre of artistry, destruction is not about bringing something to an end, it's about transforming it into a new beginning. So there's art that's temporary, and art that is destruction, but there's also art that's meant to last, but that will be destroyed nonetheless. There is, if you will, ephemeral art. Walk through an old graveyard sometime, you'll find examples of artistry in abundance that are simply fading away. It's not meant to be destroyed, but it will be destroyed nonetheless. Not really temporary, but eventually just worn out. Most of our crafts, like weather vanes and architectural elements, become this very type of art. Their utility, despite the beauty, eventually wears them down, wears them out. The ruin is still another example. Why are we so drawn to these things? The crumbling walls of castle and church, the farmhouse rotting away in the field. It's been said that ruins remind us of the inexorable march of time, yet appear eternal. They are monuments to achievement, but act as emblems of loss. My favorite example of this type of art is the Tibetan prayer flag. You've probably seen pictures of these raggedy old flags in documentaries of people who climbed Mount Everest. Now, flags can come pre-prepared with prayers for peace and compassion, strength and wisdom already on them, or people can write their own prayers on the flags. And eventually, as the flags deteriorate into nothingness, given their exposure to the elements, the prayers will be blown by the wind to spread goodwill and compassion throughout the world. The prayers on the flag becomes a permanent part of the universe as the words and images and the flags themselves fade into nothingness. And yet here's one more genre of art that we're not talking about tonight. This isn't art that's meant to be destroyed. This is something that must be destroyed in order for it to become art. Now that's not computer generated. She has really colored rice and meticulously laid it out on a board in order to make art at the very moment that all of her hours of work are destroyed. I could watch this all day. There's just something magical about that to me. And she's not the only one who does this. If you're not going to Alfonso's YouTube channel, you can find a whole bunch of these online out there. But of course, this gets to be a much more difficult type of art to define and categorize when you realize that she's actually prepared this art to be captured on video and shared through social media. So is it really destroyed? Or does it capture through technology? It's captured through technology. Does that either elevate it or diminish its artistry? Those questions are going to have to be entertained some other night. But here's an example that's much less meta than this rice picture example. Art which results from destruction. This is exactly the space in which the taxidermist works. But as with rice art, our consideration of a mounted tarpon raises more questions than it answers. I think most fishers would argue that the tarpon is most beautiful when it leaps from the water, fighting the pull towards the boat, and catches the light on its scales from sun or moon. Mounting it can't make it more beautiful, can it? Or does the death of the animal, which leads to the art, serve to charge one's memory so that he or she can thereby relive a truly beautiful moment? Let's take a somber turn just for a moment and consider one other example of this genre. The roadside altar. We've all had experience of stumbling onto one of these by the side of the road. We rarely know to whom the altar refers, but we know to what it refers: loss, death, destruction. But out of that tragedy, something beautiful, or at least honorific, and certainly artistic, emerges. And one more. In 2019, Banksy, remember him from the shredded painting? Banksy announced the release of a limited edition artwork seen here. It appears to be a pretty conventional welcome mat. You can, in fact, still go to Banksy's website. It's called Gross Domestic Product, and he has some things on occasion for sale there. You can still go there and you can see the description of this, and what it reads is this, and I quote, "This mat is hand-stitched using the fabric from Life Vest, abandoned on the beaches of the Mediterranean. Customers are advised they no longer constitute a valid buoyancy aid, although shockingly, many never did. They're cheap fakes, sold by people smugglers, and don't actually float." So to fabricate these mats, Banksy teamed up with an organization called Love Welcomes that works with refugee women in detainment camps in Greece. And the proceeds of the sale of these limited edition mats went to support refugee women. Now, unfortunately, all of these are sold out, and if you could buy one, it's probably $24.5 million or something like that. But leave it to Banksy to take the destruction of homes, of families, of lives, and to transform it into, of all things, a welcome mat, and into art which shakes us awake. So now that we know what we're not talking about tonight, let's briefly discuss art that is meant to be destroyed. Art like piñatas. It's not exactly clear how piñatas emerged as celebratory and ritual pieces of art. We know from his writings that Marco Polo explored his way through China, and we know that he became fascinated with certain paper figures. Typically, these were shaped in the image of an ox or a cow, and they were filled with seeds. And when broken, they served as a way to bring good luck. And some argue that it is from his account that we see the development of the fragile pot or piñata tradition in Italy. The fragile pots were typically used during the first Sunday in Lent, when an event would be held called the Dance of the Piñata. And over time, the piñata became more and more decorative as people covered it in ribbons and fabrics as part of the celebration. Now, in the 16th century, Spanish missionaries who came to North America used the brightly colored piñatas to attract the indigenous population to their ceremonies and really to become converts. More specifically, what they were doing were trying to co-opt Mayan and Aztec traditions where people played a game in which they covered their eyes and tried to hit a clay pot, covered with feathers usually, with a stick in order to release whatever tiny treasure was inside that clay pot. And by the time this cross-culturally influenced tradition reached Mexico, the piñata had become a secular and sacred piece of beautiful art, at least sometimes, that was, incredibly enough, meant to be destroyed. But as counterintuitive as this sounds, let's remember there are other forms of art within this genre. So effigies are also meant to be destroyed. Typically, more politically charged than piñatas, an effigy is often a life-size representation of a specific person. They make appearances in various contests and traditions, especially around New Year, Carnival, Easter. I will tell you that a lot of times these effigies appear around election cycles also. Now, most of us think of Guy Fawkes, represented in this video, when we think of an effigy that's destroyed. He was one of the conspirators in the gunpowder plot who tried to assassinate King James in 1605 by blowing up the House of Lords. A year later, the 5th of November was declared a holiday to celebrate the survival of the king, and it was celebrated with bonfires. Soon after, effigies of Guy Fawkes began to be burned on the holiday. The effigy, it can be painstakingly and lovingly and beautifully produced, but it's meant to be destroyed, and it will go up in flames by the end of the evening. And one of the most fascinating examples of this genre of art is the Buddhist sand mandala. It's a complex ritual and a complex piece of art. It's often described as a sacred art which has deep symbolism and meaning. Some argue that the production of the mandala helps one train the mind to become more enlightened. Certainly, intense concentration is required to produce these pieces. And before laying down the sand, the monks assigned to the project will draw the geometric measurements associated with the mandala. They then take several weeks to build due to the large amount of work involved in laying down the sand in such intricate detail. But the final product isn't meant to be temporary. It's meant to be destroyed. It's kind of heartbreaking to watch its destruction, but it powerfully captures the Buddhist doctrinal belief in the transitory nature of material life. And finally, the sand is collected in a jar, which is then wrapped in silk and transported to a river or any place with moving water, where it's released back into nature to spread the holy blessings of the sand mandala. And from the meditative to the explosive, fireworks are still another example of art that's meant to be destroyed. It's light, shape, and sound all together that thrills us as much for what it is as for how fleeting it must be. Both beautiful and terrifying, both affirming and negating, and totally destroyed in a climatic boom. So a cynical critic would argue that the motivation for piñatas, like all art that's meant to be destroyed, is that it serves as a windfall for the artist. Didn't Banksy kind of prove that up? After all, if the art's destroyed and you have an eager audience, then it has to be created again. Ka-ching, am I right, Alfonso?
Yes, sir.
But I'm not cynical. Piñatas and fireworks aren't just destroyed for the artist's economic gain. Something more important is going on here. To be sure, piñatas are artworks that accomplish the things all the best art does. For example, they cultivate community. And when I was a kid, my grandparents would get a piñata for the family to enjoy at their house each year as we gathered for the holidays. I hadn't seen some of my relatives for a whole year, but we all knew what to do as family when the piñata was pulled out. As art, the piñata also created intergenerational connections. I remember watching my dad, a guy who was rarely described as gregarious, working the ropes with gusto to keep the piñata from breaking too early, as Alfonso was talking about, while his young nieces and nephews swung blindly at it. And I remember him directing us kids to where to find the pieces of bit of honey candy, where they'd fallen once the piñata broke, so that we'd grab it for him and he'd share it with us. Piñatas also reinforce social conventions. They established group hierarchy. Older and stronger cousins and uncles no longer swung the stick. Instead, they pulled the ropes, they tied on blindfolds. As a 10-year-old, I'd watch my young cousins with impatience as they flailed about. I knew they wouldn't be allowed to break the piñata. At 10, I might be allowed to do so before I got too tall, learned to swing too hard. When those things happen, I'd get moved to being a rope puller too. Everyone in their place, and all as it should be. But like all great art, even as piñatas reinforced social conventions and the status quo, they opened up a liminal space where conventions could absolutely be shattered. Was that my 6-year-old cousin in a pink dress and pigtails wielding a stick against the piñata like a samurai fighting his arch nemesis? Is that my prim and proper granny diving into a pile of bodies grabbing for candy because she loves the taste of butterscotch? Only in piñata space are some things allowed. And like all great artwork, the piñata has a profound message for its audience too. Like the Zen mandala in another context, the piñata reminds us that everything is being destroyed. And not in spite of, but because everything is being destroyed, maybe everything is extraordinary. Photographs are the anti-piñata. Now, my mom was an enthusiastic photographer, and that's her in the middle there. And as a kid, she would drive me crazy with all the pictures she wanted to take, most of which I'd never see again. But having lived longer than me, she knew something I didn't know. Perhaps even that she was protecting me from. She understood that moments don't last. So I think she tried to capture moments. She tried so rigorously that if you could put all of her photographs together into a flip book, you'd have a pretty complete video of my life. Try as she might, though, the photograph could never capture the moment. How do I know? Because my dad is not much of a photographer. His finger was too quick, and this was the picture he took of us just after the forced and official and staged photograph was taken. My mom never intended this photo to make my slide deck tonight because it didn't capture the moment she thought was the most appropriate representation of us. Truthfully, these don't capture any moment at all. Not really. Because the moment couldn't be captured, regardless of how much she wanted it to be. This is a kind of funny picture, but I had no idea what we were laughing about or what my sister was doing. That moment's gone. Most of us spend our whole life trying to get comfortable, simply letting go. There's so much art around us, helping us learn this lesson. And we see the beauty of passage, the beauty of transcendence. Just look at those lanterns flying off, never to be recovered. We need passing to be shown as beautiful because it's so very hard to lose things and people and time. We are a race of capturers and collectors. We build temples costing hundreds of millions of dollars to support the preservation of all the beauty and artistry we can hold. And yet it's our curse to know that life is fleeting and we're losing everything we cherish, even though we desperately desire to keep just this moment, just that smile, just this immediate sensation of being in love. Though our temples to artistry try to convince us otherwise, finally, we can never capture nor collect. Not every piñata is a Piñata Man piñata made by Alfonso. Good thing, those are easy to smash. And when I first invited Alfonso to Schreiner a year ago, I had absolutely no intention of letting the piñata Alfonso was creating for Schreiner get filled with candy and cracked open. But as I've been preparing for tonight's presentation, I'm not so sure anymore. Because here's the interesting thing about piñatas. They implicate their audience. Maybe piñatas always have two artists, the creator and the destroyer. Do we share and both have responsibility for artistic authorship? And what happens when we can't bear to destroy it, even though it's meant to be destroyed? What happens to the art then? I sound really brave when I talk in theoretical terms about art that is meant to be destroyed. But I want all of us to remember Alfonso's time here at Schreiner every time we see that beautiful mountain lion displayed. I want it to stay captured. I want it to stay collected. But your piñata, Alfonso, is asking me to conquer this curse. Our 100th anniversary is coming up next September 18th in 2023. I've already been asked if we'll celebrate it with Alfonso's Piñata. I don't think I can do it. Alfonso tells me I shouldn't do it because it's going to be worth a lot of money one day when his fame increases. We'll see where my courage is when that day comes. So take your stick, hide your eyes if you must, get ready to swing with all your might. I believe that there is something sweet yet to be gained from all of this breaking and smashing and destruction. So thank you to our Summerlin visiting artist, Alfonso Hernandez. And thanks to all of you for being here with us tonight. Safe travels home. Thank you.